To put it metaphorically, Canada's Prime Minister is like an Uber driver, chosen by the Canadian people to take them where they want to go. The Canadian people decide the destination, not the Uber driver. While I can't see that Poilievre is guaranteed to get the Canadian people where they want to go 100%, but at least he is holding the right map. Carney, meanwhile, is driving with a completely wrong map in his hand. Like many immigrants, I don't have the right to vote. That's why I made this video with my heavy accent, so that those Canadians who can vote might hear my perspective. I sincerely hope that they will rise to the moment, recognize what's at stake, and make the right choice in the upcoming election to protect Canada's freedoms and secure its future. Hi everyone. Canada is about to hold a federal election on April 28th. The next Prime Minister will likely be one of the two leading candidates, the Liberal Party candidate Mark Carney and Conservative Party candidate Pierre Poilievre. Earlier this year, before March, the Conservative Party had a significant lead over the Liberals in the polls. However, after the Liberal Party replaced its leader, effectively distancing itself from the failures of its dismal 9-year tenure under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and especially following the onset of the US-Canada trade dispute, the party experienced an unexpected boost, and their support has since surged, bringing them into a tight race with the Conservatives. In my view, if the Liberals win in the upcoming election, then under the leadership of Carney, who is even more left-leaning and shares the radical governing philosophy of Trudeau, Canada's already declining status as a developed nation would unravel entirely. The country may soon backslide into the ranks of the developing world, following in the footsteps of Argentina or South Africa, nations that were once seen as prosperous, but were dragged down by the reckless policies of their left-wing governments. Yes, contrary to popular belief, throughout human history, progress and prosperity are exception. Regression and decline are the norm. Ironically, such downfalls frequently unfold amid widespread euphoria and the applause of the masses. Some may ask, could Canada really fall that fast? Isn't Carney making this or that promise on how he will boost Canada's economy, cut taxes, and resolve Canada's various crises if elected? Hasn't he, as the current interim Prime Minister, already suspended the carbon tax loathed by the most Canadians? Honestly, I don't care what sweet promises Carney is making now. Choosing a leader based on campaign charm is like women agreeing to marry a man just because he is attentive on a few dates. If she ends up in a miserable marriage, she has only herself to blame. Before she says the 3 magic words, "Yes, I do," she should carefully examine how this man treats the women in his daily life, such as his female subordinates or his female family members. That's where his true character is revealed. To me, Carney's current promises are just part of his dating strategy, which offers very little insight. So how can we know what Carney is truly like? In 2021, Carney published a book over 600 pages titled Values: Building a Better World for All, in which he lays out his thoughts and beliefs on economics, finance, society and government, corporate and individual responsibilities, technological trends, and the future of humanity. At the time, Carney didn't know that he would run for Prime Minister in Canada. And with a handsome income tucked under his belt, he certainly wasn't writing for money. So this book was written purely to express and promote his social ideas and political philosophy. Therefore, It is the best way to understand what's really going on in his mind. So let's start with the title of the book, Values. In Carney's own words, value refers to the market price of something. Say, a piece of clothing priced at $100. Values, on the other hand, refers to assessment of something's worth or importance. Carney believes this assessment should not just be made by individuals, but more importantly, by collectives, like nations, society, or even all of humanity. That's because individual evaluation of what matters can be highly subjective and biased. What one person finds important might not be significant to the broader community. For example, a Taylor Swift fan might be willing to spend an entire year's salary or even go into debt to buy a shirt she once wore. But from the perspective of that fan's community, society, country, or the humanity as a whole, that shirt, despite his connections to Taylor Swift, is essentially meaningless. The problem is, most of the time, each of us acts based on our subjective assessments of value and importance of things, along with their market prices. When we look for a job, we aim for the highest paying position. The car salespeople often promote the models that earn them the biggest commissions. When choosing a mobile plan, we usually go for the one that offers the best value for what we pay. Hardly anyone, when making daily market decisions, like buying or selling, stops to evaluate their choices from a collectivist viewpoint, that of his community, society, nation, or humanity. Very few consider which pizza to buy for lunch, with the broader question of what's best for humankind in mind. As a result, when individuals make decisions based on their personal preferences and market prices that do not necessarily reflect the true value of things from the collectivist perspective, two outcomes may occur. One, overvaluation of things that hold little significance for the collective, leading to a wasteful resources use. For example, shirts once worn by Taylor Swift or her concerts may command high prices, but their true actual value to the society is minimal. 2. Undervaluation of things that are truly important to the collective. Carney notes in his book that Amazon's market value vastly exceeds the profits one could make by cutting down the Amazon rainforest and selling the timber. Yet, the rainforest value to humanity is immeasurably greater than Amazon, the company. To address this imbalance, and to ensure humanity's collective well-being in the long run, Carney believes we must undertake 5 key actions. 1. Even though the market is innovative and adaptable, but the allocation of resources cannot rely solely on the market, where individuals and companies act based on maximizing their own interests. 2. The price of some certain goods and services must be reset so that they can reflect the true value and importance to the collective. For example, goods and services that support environmental production, net zero emissions, sustainability, and equity should be priced differently, either higher or lower, so that people, through their market transactions, would unconsciously help steer society toward these goals, while still preserving the market flexibility and innovation. Carbon tax is a good example of this reassessment. By taxing fossil fuels like natural gas and gasoline, they become more expensive, encouraging people to use them more spiraling or seek alternatives. At the same time, individuals and companies are also incentivized to develop cleaner energy solutions. As a result, greenhouse gas emissions are reduced and may eventually reach net zero, meaning human activities no longer contribute to the increase of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. 3. adjust the financial system, ensuring that capital and resources are more focused on what truly matters to the collective's good. 4. Educate the public about what truly matters to the collective, ensuring they make informed decisions in a market that align with societal goals and values, rather than making choices solely based on their individual preferences. 5. Emphasize and cultivate a spirit of solidarity and responsibility, so that when short-term individual interests conflict with long-term collective interests, people and businesses will voluntarily choose in favor of the collective. These are the main contents of Carney's book. It must be said, Carney is indeed a man who practices what he preaches. From March 2020 until recently, he serves as the UN Special Envoy on climate action and finance, promoting global efforts to combat climate change. He focused particularly on mobilizing public and private sector funding to achieve the Paris Agreement's target of reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, in his other role as Vice Chair of Brookfield Corporation, he concentrated on developing investment products that aimed for positive social and environmental impact. It is said that carbon tax, championed by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, was initially conceived by his close personal advisor, Carney himself. So for Carney, low carbon and net zero are far from just a hobby or casual interest. They are convictions he emphasizes repeatedly in his book, and the core around which much of his past professional life was revolved. Now, to win the election, Carney has gone somewhat against the beliefs he has upheld for years by suspending the carbon tax. But this should not be something for Canadians to celebrate. If Carney wins the election after making such a major concession, he will undoubtedly double down on the net zero policies that to him are as central and sacred as religious dogma. And with Carney at the helm of the Canadian government, he could exert far more influence than he ever could as a UN envoy or vice chair of a corporation. However, Carney's truly alarming aspect lies not only in his climate zeal, but in his fundamental worldview of the economy, society, and government. From the 5 key actions outlined above in his book, we can see that Carney views the values of the public, their assessment of worth, and the functioning of financial and economic systems as something akin to a machine, something that can be re-engineered by its designer to run in an optimal way and deliver intended and accurate results. In his book, The Fatal Conceit, Hayek referred to this kind of thinking as the mindset of the engineers. The belief that society and economy can be rationally designed, adjusted, and manipulated through education, control, planning, and management to achieve predetermined social goals. Such thinkers place a blind faith in human rationality, especially their own. But in reality, those who have tried to govern societies with this mindset have invariably brought disasters. The collapse of the Soviet Union and of every society that once adopted the planned economy serves as evidence of this failure. Hayek, in as earlier as the 1940s, predicted the downfall and failure of the Soviet model, which at the time was widely seen as a symbol of progress and the inevitable road to the future. It took nearly half a century for that prediction to finally come true. Hayek was able to foresee it for a very simple reason. Any living system, or any collective made up of living beings like human society, is far more complex than any machine. An engineer can design a machine based on physical and geometric principles to function predictably and achieve precise desired outcomes. However, no engineer, regardless of their expertise, can determine the exact moment a tree will bloom or predict the precise size of its fruits. Human societies and economies, composed of millions of individuals, are far more complex than a tree. While the price of milk in grocery stores may appear as a simple figure, it is actually the outcome of countless visible and hidden negotiations and market forces, involving dairy farmers, retailers, suppliers, and consumers, each with their own costs, quality standard, preferences, incomes, and production rates. The price is also constantly changing based on weather, milk yields, fuel process, labor costs, consumer demand, and much more. The point is this: milk price is not set by one person, one company, or some government agency. Instead, they resemble the fruit of a living tree, emerging from a complex growth process whose mechanisms are only partially understood. If you believe that the daily price of milk can be predicted or determined by a single person or group of planners, then the same logic would apply to eggs, gasoline, watermelons, bicycles, and cars, or any other product in the market. But this is precisely what the Soviet Union attempted for over 70 years, and it never worked. The so-called planned economy always failed to operate as planned. In his book, Carney argues that in order to achieve net zero, fairness, inclusivity, sustainability, and other values and social goals that they and other global elites consider important, prices of various goods and services can be artificially reset, and the operation of the financial system can also be adjusted to direct resources toward sectors that support these values and goods, thereby nudging society, even the entire world, toward the future they envision for every one of us. But, in the words of Hayek, this is a dangerous form of conceit, and a fatal one. The Gosplan, State Planning Committee of the former Soviet Union, which was responsible for setting national product prices and drafting one after another 5-year plan for Soviet Union, was staffed by hundreds of thousands of people who shared Carney's belief in rational planning and top-down control. The result of their diligent efforts? Massive misallocation of resources, constant shortages of goods, and housewives lining up for hours just to buy bread or toilet paper. Some might argue that Carney isn't trying to reset prices for all goods, nor is he trying to control all production, distribution, and trade. He isn't calling for the replacement of the market with central planning. Rather, he just wants to artificially adjust the prices of some goods and influence certain aspects of the market and financial system. In other words, he wants to find a middle path between the free market and planned economy by combining the advantages of both. But Hayek has already exposed the flaws of the so-called middle way as early as in 1945 in his classic work, The Road to Serfdom. He argues that once a society accepts central planning in some areas, it inevitably sets itself on a path toward more control and less freedom, no matter how well-intended the starting point might be. This is because the prices, production, and distribution of goods in any economy are intricately connected in ways that are far too complex for any planner or organization to fully grasp. If you try to fix the price of milk, for example, you can't stop there. You will also need to regulate the cost of everything that influences the price of the milk. For example, the price of the cattle feed, the farmer's wages, transportation expenses, and electricity rates, and more. And once you start down that path, it just never ends. You have to control the rent on the land used to grow the feed for the cattle, the housing cost for farmer workers, the price of diesel powering the milk trucks, the infrastructure cost for electricity delivery, and so on, in an endless web of interventions. This sets off an inevitable downward spiral, where the so-called middle path reveals itself as a slow and steady drift toward a full-blown central planning. And as government control spreads into more areas of economic life, the space for individual choice and freedom begins to shrink. Often so gradually that people don't notice until it's too late. Society ends up split between those who hold the power to plan and those who are planned for, who gradually become serfs. This doesn't happen overnight, but through a barely noticeable process of increasing control and decreasing liberty. That's why Hayek didn't call his book The Night to Serfdom, but rather The Road to Serfdom. In Carney's book, he repeatedly emphasizes the importance of solidarity and individual responsibility to the collective, even going so far as to see that they form the moral foundation for the functioning of a healthy society and economy. The reason is simple. When elites like Carney attempt to reshape society and repress various aspects of life based on their blueprint, individual freedoms are bound to be restricted, and public resentment is sure to follow. It's precisely at those moments that values like solidarity and responsibility to the collective will come in handy. When people question the fairness or logic of carbon tax, Carney often replies with something like, "Okay, then let our planet burn."
Pierre Poilievre would let our planet burn.
The full implication of Carney's such statement is this: you people questioning the carbon tax lack collective spirit and a sense of responsibility. You are so selfish and short-sighted that you are willing to watch humanity's only home, Earth, burn due to rising greenhouse gases. And here, we should pause and reflect. Throughout history, dictators like Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin all revered solidarity, collectivism, and individual's duty to the group as the highest virtues. That's because in totalitarian regimes, such values are the most efficient tools for suppressing dissent and punishing non-compliance. What they fear the most is for everyone to have independent thinking and freedom of speech. Returning to the main point, while Carney never explicitly says it in his book, but it is very clear, perhaps even unconsciously, that he is in pursuit of a so-called third way, or a middle way, between central planning and the free market. But this middle way will inevitably end in failure and disasters, because as Hayek rightly pointed out, there is no middle way between a planned economy and a free market. Another fundamental issue that Carney fails to understand is, what role should the government play in a country and a society? It is clear that based on the 5 major actions Carney outlines in his book, he believes that all of them should be carried out by the government. The government, in his view, should decide which goals and values are the most important for a society. It should reprice goods and services that help achieve those goals, guiding citizens to unknowingly promote them through their daily market transactions. It should consciously reshape the financial system, directing capital and resources toward these ends. The government should also educate and propagandize, ensuring that the public recognizes the importance of these values and embraces concepts such as collectivism and responsibility. Only then, according to Carney, can a society steadily advance toward these ends. In short, Carney sees government as the goal setter, the value assessor, the resource allocator, and the educator and thought leader of the people. But this concept of government directly contradicts the vision outlined by Abraham Lincoln. A legitimate government is of the people, for the people, by the people. To Lincoln, the government exists to serve the people's goals, not the other way around. The people are the masters, the government the servant. The government should not own the people or use them as tools to achieve abstract top-down visions. Instead of guiding the people, the government must be guided by the people. Instead of educating people on what to believe, it must be accountable to people's view and freedom of thought. The left-wing parties in Western societies love to say these days, we are on the right side of history. The implication is this: they have already chosen the right direction and goals for society, and the people simply need to follow along. Nowadays, the everyday freedoms of citizens in the so-called free Western societies like Canada have been steadily eroding for years. You can't pick which school your children attend or influence what they are taught in the classrooms. Government-backed organizations, ports, airports, post offices, schools, government departments strike constantly. Public safety is declining. Drugs are rampant. Ever-tightening occupational licensing and rising industrial barriers have left consumers with fewer choices and forced them to accept higher prices, inefficiency, and poor quality. In certain provinces in Canada, you can only buy car insurance from only one provider and only purchase alcohol from the government-monopolized stores. All of this are the direct result of increasingly heavy-handed government control and regulation, particularly under the Liberal Party. It is an erosion of freedom disguised as social good. But many Canadians have grown numb to these egregious intrusions. I'm from China, and I know what a planned economy looks like. We Chinese tried it for decades before we finally abandoned it in the 1980s and chose the market economy, which helped us to grow our economy to the second largest in the world today. And back in China, each year before my car insurance expired, insurance companies would compete to offer me better deals for the next year. I could walk around the city at midnight and feel safe. These things are not possible or common anymore in Canada today, especially in the past 9 years. In the upcoming election, if Carney, the man full of plans and control-oriented thinking, becomes Prime Minister, the remaining freedoms and prosperity in Canada will continue to fade, possibly irreversibly. Just to be clear, I'm not particularly invested in Pierre Poilievre's platform. But after following his views over the past 3 years, I've come to see that Pierre Poilievre's principles align more closely with freedom and prosperity than anything Carney can offer. To put it metaphorically, Canada's Prime Minister is like an Uber driver chosen by the Canadian people to take them where they want to go. The Canadian people decide the destination, not the Uber driver. While I can't see that Poilievre is guaranteed to get the Canadian people where they want to go 100%, but at least he is holding the right map. Carney, meanwhile, is driving with a completely wrong map in his hand. So between the two, Poilievre clearly stands a much bigger chance of taking the Canadians to their desired destination. As an immigrant, Canada is not my birthplace, but it is the ship that I chose to board. And if this ship sinks, I will suffer, both physically and psychologically. I'm not using Confucianism or any mystical Eastern tradition to criticize Carney. I'm drawing on the classical Western ideas of Adam Smith, Hayek, and Friedman, economic and political philosophies rooted in the foundations of the West. Like many immigrants, I don't have the right to vote. That's why I made this video with my heavy accent, so that those Canadians who can vote might hear my perspective. I sincerely hope that they will rise to the moment, recognize what's at stake, and make the right choice in the upcoming election to protect Canada's freedoms and secure its future. Lastly, some of you might be wondering, if I reject Carney's obsession with net zero, then how should we address the global warming? And if I reject putting collective goals above individual ones, then how do we resolve the conflicts between them? Well, if you've read Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, The Constitution of Liberty, Law, Legislation, and Liberty, and some other of his books, you will find the answers there. But due to the time constraints, I can only give you the short answer today. The solutions offered by Mark Carney, Justin Trudeau, and all other Davos global elites are wrong. I strongly agree with Jordan Peterson on this matter, and you may find his thoughts on this topic by the following link to his latest video. That's all for today. Thank you.